Hello everyone, welcome back. So I've got a book haul to share with you today, and I'm going to do the fiction first and the nonfiction last, because I know that a lot of people prefer fiction and they have zero interest in nonfiction. And nonfiction lovers, I'm sorry, you're just going to have to wait, but it won't take too long. So here we go. The first book I picked up is one I'm hoping to read this month for Garb August. It is by W. Michael Gear and Kathleen O'Neill Gear. It's called Dark Inheritance. This one seems really interesting to me. So here we go. Dr. Jim Dutton and his daughter Brett are raising Umber, a bonobo chimp bred by pharmaceutical giant SAC. S-A-C. But Jim is slowly realizing that Umber, who reads, types, and even contemplates theology, is too intelligent to be a normal ape, and more closely resembles one of humanity's ancient ancestors. When SAC abruptly demands Umber's return, Jim and Brett are compelled to discover why. Their quest leads to a SAC facility in Africa, where they discover a covert genetics lab, crude buildings decorated with skulls, and human corpses savagely hacked to pieces. A project to genetically augment apes has worked too well and gone hideously wrong. Now Jim, Brett, and Umber are trapped in the jungle, hunted by beings who are brutally aggressive, brilliantly inventive, and far stronger than any human. And like humans, they can be utterly and murderously psychotic. So that sounds really awesome. Sounds like they probably read Congo by Michael Crichton too, but this will probably be really good. I read Congo several years ago. I don't remember it very well. I remember the movie much better than I remember the book, but I've never gotten along with Michael Crichton's books. Here is On Basilisk Station by David Weber. I've wanted this for quite some time. This is about a starship captain who comes. Something happens. I read a little bit of this, but I couldn't get into it at the time. But she gets assigned to her own starship, and she's captain for the first time of this large ship. And I'm not sure exactly what happens, but something doesn't happen right, and she gets sent off to this faraway space station, basically the backwaters, and I'm really interested to see how this one goes. I've heard good things about this. Next is a Star Wars book. It is book 1 of the Bounty Hunter Wars, Star Wars, The Mandalorian Armor, and this is from the 90s, I think from 97, or it's from 1998. So that's a really awesome cover, first of all. But I really have been enjoying the Star Wars books I've been reading over the past year or so. The first Star Wars book I ever read was called Lando Calrissian and the Star Cave of Von Boca, I think. And, it was okay. It wasn't spectacular, but it was enjoyable. And I have been reading Star Wars books ever since. That was only a few years ago. And when I got back into reading fiction, because it had been some time since I'd really enjoyed reading fiction. So these next 3 books I've already had in one form or another, but I'm glad to have them. And here is Floodgate by Alistair MacLean. So I collect Alistair MacLean editions. I love Alistair MacLean's books. And I don't know why, but his novels just speak to me. My favorite of his novels is Night Without End. I don't know why. I just love that book. It's about, well, it would take a minute for me to explain, but it takes place in Greenland. There's a plane crash, and the guys at this weather station have to take the passengers of this plane back to civilization, and it's just crazy. It's freezing cold, and there's like been a murder on this plane, and he has to figure out who's done it, and they're in danger the whole time. That's not Floodgate, though. Floodgate is one of his later novels. I already have an edition of this, but this is a different edition with a different cover. I like this cover better. But there's like a terrorist group who's going to flood the Netherlands, and I guess this guy and this lady have to solve they have to to deal with these terrorists. So I haven't read that yet, but MacLean's books are one of those, I'm kind of afraid to read his books. Not because I don't like them, but because I very much like them. And because I'm kind of afraid of running out of them. And I know that sounds kind of odd, but I really like the idea of having a shelf of his books that I haven't read and to read them. I don't know. I know that seems kind of odd. Here is a book I read for the first time when I was in 8th grade or 7th grade. I'm pretty sure it was 8th grade. It is Thinner by Stephen King. And when he was writing as Richard Bachman, so this is one of the Bachman books. I've read all of the Bachman books. I've read almost everything King has written up until the mid-90s. And I really, really like Thinner. And sometimes I feel like the only person on earth who really, really likes Thinner. This could be a Garbogust read. And I don't want to make any Stephen King fans angry by saying that. But I think even Stephen King would admit that his Bachman books tend to be kind of trashy. And I mean trashy in a good way, not in a bad way. I think Thinner is a great book. I think it's definitely one of my favorite Stephen King novels. And I haven't really talked about Stephen King on this channel before. I have a whole shelf of his books downstairs, and I've read a lot of them. And if I ever get back to my bookshelf tour, I will talk about his books. It kind of bothers me how on Booktube people get angry if you talk about Stephen King's books one way or the other. Either they get angry when you say you don't like them, or they get angry when you say you do like them, and they go, oh, that's all there is on Booktube. It's just people talking about how great Stephen King is. I like his books. I don't think they're great literature, but I like his books. And, that's just my feelings about it. I don't like all his books. I don't think he's the greatest writer of all time or anything like that, but they're very entertaining. And, I like to turn to them. I guess I've said before that I really don't have comfort reads, but I've been thinking about it lately, and I definitely do. It's just they're not the books that I would think of as comfort reads or anything like that. So I may do a video on that, my comfort reads, but they're not really, I don't know, they're not really what you would expect from comfort reads, I guess. And now this one is a replacement. I already have this book. I have this exact edition. I bought it when I was 8 or 9, and I loved it. I carried it everywhere, even before I was reading the stories. Like, I could read the stories, I just wasn't. I was looking at the pictures, and I was entranced by these pictures. So I saw this. I actually bought this earlier today. I went with my mom to a bookstore. I've been looking for a copy of Red Dragon because I recently read The Silence of the Lambs, and I've really been wanting to return to Red Dragon. But I saw this on the shelf, and I was just ecstatic because I have been looking for this. I've been looking for this exact edition. This is the one that I want. This is the edition that, it gives me feelings. Because this is one of the first books that I ever really bought for myself. And I still have the other one. It's downstairs. I've showed it before a couple of times. And it's falling apart. The pages are falling out. I don't open it anymore because the pages are starting to fall out. But this one is in really good condition. So I have this now, and I'm going to keep this one upstairs. I have several editions of Sherlock Holmes. I have the 2-volume brown paperbacks with the Victorian pictures on the cover from Bantam. They came in a box set. I don't have the box anymore. I don't know if I had the box for that set. I think I actually have 2 sets of that, and I think one is at my dad's and one is here. And I have the facsimile edition of the Strand magazine, which is really too big to read comfortably, especially the way I read. I read laying down. I read like on my side. I don't just sit up and read like this a lot. I recline. And so having a really big, the Strand edition is like this tall and this wide, because those original Strand magazines, they weren't magazines really, they were books, and they were big, heavy books. But this has the illustrations. It doesn't have all the illustrations, and it doesn't have the books, the novels, but it does, and I just love these illustrations. I was fascinated by them when I was a kid, and I think I've said this before, but when I was old enough to realize that London didn't look like this anymore, I was devastated. But, you know, anyway, this is just, I was really, really happy to find this, and I'm really glad to have it. I'm really glad to have that. So from here on out, it is nonfiction. So anybody who's not interested in nonfiction, I'll see you next time. But if you're interested in nonfiction, there's only 4 books. 5. There's 5. So I've been on kind of a Hunter S. Thompson kick lately, or at least I've been getting his books. And this is Fear and Loathing on the Campaign Trail, 72. So this is probably very, very stale, like bread that's been left out for a week. But, you know, you got George McGovern and Nixon and who else? Ed Muskie. It's been a long time. I did actually try to read this. I got to a point where Hunter was talking about drinking Old Crow whiskey in the pool at one of these upscale hotels. And I was just really too young to be interested in politics. I don't know if I will actually read this through, but it was $1, and I was really glad to see this. This is a 1972 copy, and it's got pictures. It's illustrated. Let me see if I can find some. Here is a picture of, let's see, I think that's George McGovern, right? And let's see. Yeah, there he is again there. And Hunter was very much a George McGovern man. And there's Hubert Humphrey. But anyway, I'm glad to have this. I recently got Hell's Angels, and I recently read Generation of Swine, which was okay. I think personally that the further back you go in Hunter's career, the better his journalism was. That's just my opinion. Here we have White House Diary by Jimmy Carter. I thought that I already had this once I got it, but I don't. I actually have his like memoir of being president. It's a blue book, and it's like right in here, but I'm not sure if it's on camera. And so I thought I had 2 of these, but they're different books. And I have several books about Jimmy Carter. I read one earlier this year called Dasher, and it was pretty good. I don't know how good this will be. These are just kind of jottings that he did daily as president, but should be interesting. Let's see. Now the next is a book that was recommended to me by Steve Donahue, and what it was, about October of last year, I asked him on a live stream. I had just finished a biography of George VI by Sarah Bradford. It was really good. I really, really enjoyed that. I made a video about it, but it's really more of a video essay about George VI than it is about the book. I was kind of new to all this, and I didn't know what I was doing. But I asked him if Michael Thornton's Blood Feud, or Royal Feud, I think it was Royal Feud, was worth reading. And he said it was kind of but he recommended this book to me, The Windsor Story by, let's see, J. Bryan III and Charles J.V. Murphy. And after I read that book about George VI, I was really interested in his older brother, the Duke of Windsor, Edward VIII, and his story, because it is a really interesting story. I mean, he gave up being king for Wallace Simpson, and I tend to think he gave up being king because he didn't want the job. But I'm really interested to see how this goes. And, you know, you can look for the pictures in this book, and he gets sadder and sadder looking. Like, I'm not sure if he's, because she wasn't good to him. You know, she cheated on him, she treated him very poorly, and he gave up the throne for her. And I'm really, really interested to see how this story goes. So, yeah. Here is A Field Guide to American Houses by Virginia and Lee McAlester, and this is really cool. I've been looking for this book, and in fact, I've been looking for this book for quite some time. And I just love books about architecture, and I'm not really not the intense ones, you know, but the ones with all these pictures that tell you about the different styles of American architecture. I don't like architecture books about all countries, but This one is neat because, I live in an older part of the country. It's not really old like some parts of the country. Or, well, if you live in Europe, you're probably saying your country's not old. It's very young, which is true. But we have interesting architecture styles here in the US, and this is a field guide to them. So I can I can wander about my neighborhood and go, oh, that's Italianate, and that's Georgian, and that's what is it, Tudor and Colonial Revival. But this is just really neat. I wish it was in color, but I'm okay with it. It's from the 80s. I think this is from the 90s, but it also explains how they came into being, the different forms, the different styles. Steamboat Gothic is one of my favorites. It's a little bit much, but I like it. You have, anyway, I could go on about this for quite some time. This is really cool. I have another one called American Shelter that's kind of like this. I don't know. I really like these books like this. And the last one is a book I don't know if I'm going to be able to get through it. I'm really interested in the concept. It's To Infinity and Beyond by Eli Maor, and let's see, A Cultural History of the Infinite. And so I knew that this would have a lot of math in it. And the thing you need to know about me is that I'm really, really bad at math. Like, I failed math in sixth grade and I had to go to summer school. I barely passed in seventh. I failed again in eighth, and the only reason I passed was because a teacher took pity on me and he helped me after school. And I failed in ninth grade because I had a teacher who was he was like a doctorate student, or he was a doctor. And a doctor of what? I'm not entirely sure, but he was kind of running an experiment on us to do this self-directed learning. And I got to tell you, when you put a bunch of ninth graders in a room, especially when one of them's really bad at math, and you do this self-directed learning where they have to like go and get their own papers, they don't do it. And so everybody in that class was passed just on principle. We all passed, even though I did terribly. I failed again the next year. It's a long story. I was not very good at math because when I was a kid, I really detested anything that I had to work to do. Because when I was young, I was one of these kids who I could do almost anything. And it wasn't hard for me. It was like very easy. But math was hard for me, and I just detested it. I didn't want anything to do with it because I wasn't any good at it. And I'm much better at it now than I was then. I don't struggle. When I was a kid, I struggled. And I didn't, I didn't like to come up against that wall. But anyway, that's a long explanation of trying to say that this is going to be a difficult read for me. But I'm really interested in it, and I don't know why. The concept of infinity is really, there's the galaxy, a galaxy. What galaxy is that? The Great Galaxy in Andromeda. But I know this has fractals and things like that, so this should be really interesting. But anyway, so that is my book haul. Can I do a pyramid? Let's see. It's going to be a heavy one. There's some heavy lifting. But I'm really glad to have these. And, I hope to read, like I said, I hope to read Dark Inheritance for Garbage, so stay tuned. And I've been thinking about doing a reread of the Sherlock Holmes stories also. Yeah, so that is my book haul for today. I probably won't have another book haul for quite some time, probably another month or something like that, month and a half. It just kind of depends, I can't stop myself from going to bookstores. They're like my favorite haunts, and I don't feel right when I stop myself from going to bookstores, but I have really, really scaled back my book buying. And all of these, I think the most expensive actually was Dark Inheritance. I think it was $4. Most of them were $1 or $2. And so, yeah. Anyway, thanks for joining me today, and I'll see you next time.